Being a part of the scout troop in my small Ohio town was a significant aspect of my upbringing. The town, with its bleak remnants of an industrial past, offered little in terms of entertainment. The local scout troop became our refuge, engaging us in various activities such as hiking in dreary local parks and participating in community service like canned food drives. One summer, I received an email from a camp manager requesting our assistance in a park I had never heard of before. Excited about the prospect of a new adventure, I quickly organized a team of 5 scouts, including myself, and gathered the necessary tools for the job. The peculiarities began with the fact that none of us were familiar with this particular park, and the task involved hiking nearly 7 miles, a considerable distance, especially with tools. However, the promise of lodging for camping made it a worthwhile endeavor. On the day of the expedition, I loaded up my truck, picked up my friend Lincoln, and met with the one adult chaperone available. We headed towards the park and, upon arriving, were greeted by a gate made of old telephone pylons, forming the words, Camp Kismet. The camp office, a ramshackle building on the verge of collapse, left us questioning if we were in the right place. However, a small note on the backside of the building provided directions, leading us to the area we were assigned to work on. Our task was to clear the brush around a climbing tower, a structure none of us knew existed in this camp. The tower, tall and surprisingly thin, raised concerns about its safety. Nevertheless, we settled in for the night in basic cabins, ready to tackle the job the next day. The following morning, we started early with a hearty breakfast and divided into teams. As I ventured towards the climbing tower, I couldn't shake an eerie feeling from the morning before. Rounding a bend, the tower came into view, and my heart skipped a beat. 3/4 of the way up, I spotted a vaguely human-shaped figure. A rope attached to its waist provided a semblance of relief, but when I reached for binoculars, the figure had disappeared. Shaking off the strange sighting, I organized the team, assigning tasks for the day. While one group cleared brush outside the tower, another scout named Knight and I ventured inside. To our surprise, we found more than just overgrown brush, a metal filing cabinet labeled permission slips, and a trunk with helmets. The cabinet contained folders dated from 1996 to 1998, each filled with permission forms. In the back, a yellowed piece of notebook paper caught my attention. Reading aloud, I discovered a disturbing message, implicating individuals named Tom, Johnson, and Diane in a potential cover-up related to a child's death. The revelation sent shivers down our spines. As we absorbed the shocking information, a creaking sound emanated from the top of the tower, and a wispy voice echoed. Boards began to fall, and we witnessed a chilling sequence of events that culminated in the sound of a heavy object hitting the ground. Panicking, we fled the tower, expecting to find someone injured, but there was no one. Confused and shaken, we rejoined the group, attempting to explain the inexplicable events. However, to our dismay, the tower appeared untouched, no missing boards, no creaking beams, and certainly no fallen climber. We hastily packed our bags, loaded our vehicles, and left the camp behind, haunted by the unexplainable events. I never heard from anyone involved again, except for a perplexing email from the camp manager, thanking us for our help, even though we hadn't completed the task. I vowed never to return to that area, the unsettling crunching sound serving as a stark reminder to stay far away from Camp Kismet. The day it all unfolded was deceptively pleasant. The sun played peekaboo through the trees, and the occasional squirrel's chittering symphony echoed in the distance. Having spent my entire life in the serene embrace of British Columbia, I was accustomed to the mundane, a self-professed weird and quiet teenager who found solace in the tranquility of nature. Our family had embarked on a camping trip to the renowned Horseshoe Lake, a local haven known for horse show tournaments that drew adults from far and wide for a cocktail of camaraderie, smoke-filled air, and the reunions of old friendships or the forging of new ones. The lake, aptly named, was nestled against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, a daunting yet majestic sight. However, my escapade took me a mere few miles from the lake, far enough to feel the thrill of solitude, close enough to trace my way back to the campsite. Armed with my trusty hatchet, I meandered through the woods, scouting for the perfect spot to either take a nap or construct a makeshift fort. Eventually, I stumbled upon a small clearing, surrounded by familiar landmarks. Comfortable and well acquainted with the surroundings, I reclined against a mossy tree, casting my gaze skyward. Time slipped away, and I must have dozed off, only to rouse to the realization that the sun was beginning its descent. With my hatchet in hand, I rose, rubbing the remnants of sleep from my eyes. The journey back to camp commenced, but an uncanny stillness blanketed the once lively woods. Growing up in the wilderness had instilled in me an acute awareness: silence was an ominous sign. I paused, straining my ears against the fabric of my hoodie, a slight unease settling in. Dismissing my paranoia, I took a step forward, only to trip over an inconspicuous stump. Laughter bubbled within me as I chastised myself for irrational fears. Nonetheless, the tranquility persisted, and a nagging feeling gnawed at my instincts. I embarked on the journey back to camp, a leisurely pace replaced by a sense of urgency as darkness began to cloak the surroundings. A putrid odor wafted through the air, and the thought of encountering a cougar, common in the region, gripped me. Anxious, I scanned for signs of the elusive predator, my eyes darting for bone piles or any telltale remnants. The terrain became increasingly obscure, bushes and trees merging into a disorienting labyrinth. Panic set in. I lacked both light and a means of defense. The scent of danger lingered, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. A horrifying realization crept over me: I was not alone. The disconcerting feeling of being watched intensified, prompting me to turn and confront the darkness. Stupidly, I locked eyes with the shadowed foliage, desperately hoping it was just my imagination. I pressed on, the ominous aura clinging to me like a shroud. It was then that the unsettling sound reached my ears, a presence, unseen but undeniably there. My every instinct urged me to flee, but my legs betrayed me, moving at an agonizingly sluggish pace. The forest, once familiar, transformed into an alien landscape as I ran. The snapping of twigs echoed behind me, the sinister pursuit gaining ground. Panic accelerated my heart rate, and with each step, I felt the invisible entity drawing closer. I stumbled, fear coursing through my veins, but the distant murmur of the campsite spurred me on. As I breached the last hatchet mark, I burst into the campsite, breathless and disoriented. I sank beside the campfire, attempting to quell the tremors that racked my body. It couldn't have been a bear, they didn't sound like that. Nor could it be a bobcat or cougar, I knew their sounds. What lurked in those woods, I couldn't fathom. Luck had been on my side. Had I awoken a minute later, the creature might have claimed me in the embrace of the forest's nocturnal clutches. The enigma of that night, the unseen and unnamed terror, remains etched in the recesses of my memory. In the quaint village of Eldermere, nestled just beyond the northern reaches of the UK near the Scottish border, I found myself entangled in a peculiar series of events during my boyhood. It all began when my parents, in their quest to inject more activity into my life, enrolled me in a local Boy Scout group. Little did I know that this decision would lead me to an unforgettable 7-day camping trip that would forever alter my perception of the serene woods I had grown up exploring with my father and grandfather. The chosen campsite was a secluded haven, devoid of any other soul or group. My friend, Ollie, and I were paired together for tent duties, and by 6 p.m., our canvas abode stood proudly under the open sky. As we wrapped up our evening meal, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a darkness that painted the vast expanse above with countless stars. Eager to make the most of the pristine night sky, we kindled a campfire around 8:30 to 9 p.m. and embarked on an evening of stargazing, free from the shackles of light pollution. As we lay there, entranced by the celestial dance overhead, Ollie abruptly halted our conversation and directed my attention towards a peculiar sight. Amidst the stars, a luminous red object, akin to a speeding bullet, maneuvered through the heavens in a mesmerizing zigzag pattern. Our group, guided by a former RAF member, recognized that no conventional human craft could execute such maneuvers. Bizarre yet fascinating, the spectacle left us with more questions than answers. With the enigmatic encounter lingering in our thoughts, we retired to our tents, weary but content. However, the night was far from over. Around 2 a.m., raindrops played a gentle melody on the fabric of our shelter, but beneath this natural symphony, a disconcerting grunting emanated from the nearby forest. Panic seized my heart as I lay there, trembling and on the verge of tears. The mysterious creature, unseen but certainly heard, ambled past our tents, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. Somehow, I managed to drift back into an uneasy slumber, haunted by the lingering echoes of that nocturnal encounter. The following morning, feigning illness, I successfully convinced the group to allow me an early departure. It wasn't until later that I discovered Ollie had experienced a similar disturbance in the night, a disconcerting grunting sound that echoed my own eerie encounter. In the days that followed, Ollie and I maintained our silence about the bizarre events, chatting occasionally through the digital realm of Discord. The topic of that fateful night, marked by a UFO's erratic dance and an unexplainable forest symphony, remained an unspoken mystery between us, leaving me to wonder if those two enigmatic occurrences were connected in ways I couldn't fathom. My name is Alex Turner, and at the age of 25, I embarked on a solo camping adventure near the shores of Lake Michigan. It was a departure from my usual routine of camping with friends or my trusty canine companion. The chosen spot was nestled about a 9-mile hike into the wilderness, a secluded haven that promised solitude and communion with nature. As I set up my campsite, a warm fire crackling in the evening air, and the tent securely pitched, I found solace in the simple pleasures, reading a book, exploring the surrounding trails, and immersing myself in the quietude of the forest. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a shadowy veil over the landscape, and I nestled by the campfire, determined not to let the encroaching darkness disturb my peace of mind. It was then that I first heard the peculiar noise, a deep, guttural grunt that reverberated through the stillness of the night. My initial assumption, a deer lurking in the shadows, was quickly dismissed when I considered the sheer size of the creature. The forest, once a serene backdrop to my solitary retreat, now seemed to carry an unspoken tension. Nightfall descended, and I retreated into the sanctuary of my tent, rifle at the ready for any unforeseen encounters with wildlife. I dozed off, only to be rudely awakened by a nightmare that lingered even as I surfaced to consciousness. My disquiet was amplified by a disturbing sound, a scratching at the fabric of my tent. What I initially dismissed as a curious coyote revealed itself to be something far more unsettling. With a mixture of dread and curiosity, I unzipped the tent, expecting to confront a canine intruder. Instead, my eyes widened at the sight of a thin, gray figure. A being, half as wide as myself but towering twice as tall, stood mere feet away, its unsettling form blending into the darkness of the forest. The creature's features were alien and its movements unnaturally fluid. Frozen in a surreal moment, I attempted to assert dominance, shouting and flailing my arms in an attempt to scare it away. The creature, however, seemed unbothered by my efforts. After what felt like an eternity, it retreated into the shadows, disappearing into the inky blackness of the surrounding woods. I stood there, heart pounding, mind racing, as the gravity of the encounter sank in. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like an alien landscape harboring enigmatic entities. Without hesitation, fueled by a surge of adrenaline, I fled the eerie scene, sprinting through the night, navigating the familiar but now ominous trails that led me back to my car. The solitude I had sought had transformed into a haunting ordeal, etching an indelible mark on my memory. It was a sultry July night, infused with a paradoxical chill that sent shivers down my spine. I found myself at the residence of my buddy, Elijah, celebrating his birthday alongside our comrades Miles and Jason. We decided to embark on a whimsical escapade, a folk campout right in Elijah's backyard. The plan was simple: erect a tent, revel in each other's company, and revelry, without unsettling the tranquility of Elijah's family. Little did I know, the night would unravel into an unforeseen nightmare. Earlier that day, as I arrived, Elijah shared an unsettling tidbit: his chickens were mysteriously disappearing. The ominous undertone lingered in my mind, an inkling that would soon prove impossible to ignore. The idea of nocturnal predators prowling in the darkness began to plague my thoughts. I yearned for a night of laughter and camaraderie, not one tinged with fear and paranoia. As night fell and we congregated in the tent, the glow of our flashlights and phones replaced the dwindling campfire. Elijah's younger brother joined our nocturnal gathering, adding to the mirth. However, the eerie feeling persisted, and the fear that I suppressed clawed its way to the forefront when I started hearing strange noises outside the tent. Jason, attuned to the unnerving atmosphere, suggested retreating back into the safety of the house. Yet, I couldn't bear to be labeled the party pooper, so I masked my unease and continued to engage with the group. The clock struck 11 p.m., and the unsettling noises escalated. It was only Elijah, Miles, and myself left in the tent, attempting to distract ourselves from the encroaching fear. A sudden jolt shook the tent as if a malevolent force had collided with it. Panic set in, and I desperately tried to convince myself it was a mere natural occurrence. The night wore on, and at 11:30 p.m., the disconcerting events reached a crescendo. Footsteps persisted, accompanied by the unsettling sound of something sprinting through the nearby field. Exasperated and worn out, I suggested we retreat to the safety of the house, but my companions insisted on investigating further. As terror gripped me, I found myself coerced into accompanying them. Huddled together, we ventured toward the chicken coops, our hearts pounding in unison. The scene that unfolded before us defied all reason and still haunts the recesses of my mind. A towering figure, cloaked in absolute darkness, loomed with elongated claws. A collective scream echoed through the night, and we fled back to the house, fear propelling us forward. For the remainder of that night, sleep eluded me. I braced myself for the sinister entity to breach the sanctuary of the house or appear at a window. But, to my relief, it never did. The mysterious figure vanished into the night, leaving me haunted by the inexplicable events that transpired in the shadowy hours of that July night.